And to Labour, who I believe I saw in Kelly and others hopping around the protest today, to actually now vote to pay the nurses. So we would also like, if there are nurses, to spread the word. We'd like to have a lot of people in the gallery for that. It's 3 to 5 on Wednesday. You're on strike anyway, you might as well come over. So I just wanted to say that. Now, the reason we have a lot of speakers, we obviously broke our whole day because of the nurses' dispute, and we cut a debate and other things that we were going to have. So apologies for the number of speakers, but hopefully we can, get through them now. So our next speaker is Neil Moore. Neil has played a fantastic role in organising young and precarious workers in Unite Trade Union in the North, so he's going to fill us in on that.
Yeah, and that's a very, very hard act to follow. I think the title of this rally, We Want to Live, Just Not Exist, I think sums up the mood of young workers, of the younger generation, of students, but also older working class people in Ireland, north and south. Bruce, thanks for the introduction there. I've been involved for about a year now in organising young precarious hospitality workers in Belfast. And up until that point, until I seen the likes of the developing strikes that have happened over the past year, you think young precarious, you're thinking Deliveroo riders, you're thinking hospitality staff, people relying on tips, people relying on low wages. But actually, today demonstrates that precarity doesn't just affect people in these low wage, called entry-level jobs. It's in the health sector, it's in education, it's in construction and retail, just to name a few, that now face this new reality of work. It's both public and private sector workers who face low pay, worsening work conditions, dangerous work environments, long hours and casualisation. And this trend's only growing. I mean, there was a report out from Task, a think tank, just before Christmas there, that stated 44% of Irish workers in the South are now precariously unemployed. And that's just a conservative figure. Because of the nature of precarity, it's so hard to get a figure on that, with people in part-time work, zero-hour contracts, people getting cash-in-hand jobs as well. And that's the reality of our new supposed gig economy. And this precarity, there's no guarantee of hours, no guarantee of income from week to week, no sick pay, no annual leave, no pension entitlements, and it leads to more and more people being unsure if they can even cover their basic monthly bills, with many having to rely on social welfare, and many young people having to rely on their parents well into their 30s for help. And of course, in some of the most precarious sectors, like hospitality, this comes with far more of a sinister element, because in hospitality in the north, you have 3/4 of workers now earning below the living wage. And it means being sent home early because it's quiet, or not receiving a tip off a large table could mean making the tough choice between eating, or paying your skyrocketing rent late again. In fact, the median wage for a hotel worker in the north is £7.5 an hour. That's nearly £1 below the legal minimum wage for over 25s. I think that just reflects how low paying and how super exploitative these bosses are and what they can get away with. Exploiting migrant labour, pulling the wool over people's eyes, taking advantage of young people through the age discriminatory minimum wages and increased casualisation of staff. And low pay and precarious conditions is playing an even more sinister role. An instance of sexual harassment, which is particularly sharp amongst young female workers on agency and zero-hour contracts, where instances of this are rampant. Last year, Unite the Union published a Not in the Menu survey, which was conducted in Britain, and it really makes the link between precarity and sexual harassment clear, with 9 out of 10 workers who were surveyed in that survey saying they've experienced 1 or more incidents of sexual harassment in their employment. 40% said it was because of having to wear a uniform, being made to wear it by management in a certain way, of customers presuming that they can do things to people just because they're service employees, and because of this attitude of an acceptable level of harassment and refusal of management to do anything about it. I think that's a damning indictment of where we are now, of neoliberal capitalism, that young people and a generation of the most productive workers in Europe, a report came out last week and said, are faced with the choice of having to put up with sexual harassment in order to pay, make ends meet, and pay for basic necessities, still picking for those few luxuries like switching the heating on for an extra hour at night. It's putting up with an acceptable level of sexual harassment, and that's the way it's deemed by us, but it's also the way it's deemed by hospitality bosses in order to get that tip just to be able to pay your rent because it's due and payday's not for another week, or else having to stay below the radar because you're a migrant worker, and losing that job or losing your hours or dropping below a certain amount of hours could mean your visa and your right to work is withdrawn. And at the same time, wealth inequality is growing to absurd levels. Now in Ireland, 72.7% of the wealth is held by the top 20%, and 40% of the wealth is held by the top 5%. Exploitative industries often claim poverty and tight margins as justification for their employment practices. This age-old chestnut of, oh, it's mostly small and medium businesses in Ireland. Well, these small and medium businesses in Ireland are massively profitable. You've huge multinationals to start with, but Irish tourism pulled in more than €2 billion in profit, and again, that's a conservative estimate because it doesn't account for people who aren't members of these big hospitality associations that are determined to break any attempt at workers getting organised. And I think these conditions exist because as the multinationals and the bosses get richer off the exploitation of precarious workers, it hasn't been met with any real or determined resistance from the trade union movement as a whole. In hospitality in the north, less than 1% of workers are unionised, and in the trade union movement and in general, young people, migrants, low-paid workers, people without a degree are less likely to be unionised than other sections of workers. And the bosses know it. The bosses know that they can get away with this and they can push and drive conditions down. And of course, the trade union movement doesn't help either. Many trade union leaders have been very quick to write off Generation Precarious as unorganisable, too precarious, too difficult to task, to just organise, or just plain apathetic. That's the easy excuse, shrug your shoulders and say young people are apathetic. Yet the events of the past couple of years have proven them wrong time and time again. In 2017, you've seen the first ever strike of fast food workers in the UK, the McDonald's strike, demanding £10 an hour minimum wage, demanding union recognition. And that went on to inspire, in January, workers in TGI Fridays in Britain, who actually were beating down the door of Unite, approached them, asking to strike, asking for support for a strike. This quickly snowballed. It was inspired by the McDonald's strike. And on 3 occasions last year, they went out and strike, growing and spreading each time with a WhatsApp group of well over 1,000 people in it, organising these strike actions, unofficial actions, and building up for national days of strike. From that, they've been able to win major concessions. The fight goes on. Next week on Valentine's Day is the first anniversary of the first TGI strike. And this inspired other struggles. It's where I got involved. In June, workers in Boojum, everyone's favourite chain of Mexican burrito bars in the north, decided that they were going to get organised. And this was a fight that went on for a number of months, where workers themselves had their own meetings, often done kind of in secret and clandestine, and oh, this is a secret thing, meeting in coffee shops, meeting in bars at odd hours of the night. But they were able to organise around similar sort of issues, and they were able to win major concessions, taking on the boss, where they actually marched in wearing red bandanas in their head one day to present a petition, and the boss, an ex-Ireland rugby international, was shaking, like literally shaking. And as a result of that, they were able to win 100% of their tips, which were being taken to make up till shortages, back pay for whenever they were forced to work for free after close, and an end to bullying and unfair management practices. And of course, we've seen international examples of this that have sparked even more. In September, McDonald's workers in the US, who've also been fighting for $15 an hour, a doubling in some cases of the minimum wage, which undoubtedly inspired the McDonald's workers in Britain, went on strike against sexual harassment in 10 cities across the US. This walkout was historic again, as it was the first ever nationwide strike explicitly against sexual harassment. And it wasn't led, it was linked in with the Me Too movement, but it wasn't led by the super elites of Hollywood or DC, but working class women and people of colour, and I think that's a trend we're going to continue to see. Last year you had the Lloyd strike as well, a lot to sum up here, where over 200 workers got organised, exasperated by the poor treatment of the company. They joined a union, decided to take action, and once again they won concessions. They voted to step back down, but they could have taken on that fight, and they were prepared to take on a longer fight if necessary. And then in November, thousands of Google staff across the world staged a series of walkouts and protests that claims of sexual harassment, gender equality and systemic racism. How wrong those trade unions that said young precarious workers won't get organised were, whenever you have workers that aren't even unionised in the slightest walk out en masse in their tens of thousands, and when workers like TGI workers come to the unions demand strike action. And I think this year we can expect further explosions inspired by the actions of today, the nurses' strike to start with. I think there's going to be further interest amongst young workers right at the bottom of the pile in getting organised to win. But trade unions need to step up their game. They need to school these layers of workers who are prepared to explode in a number of issues, how they organise their struggles. They have to make it clear that it involves more than just getting people signed up to the union, and once they pay their union dues, that'll be fine. It's actually about empowering workers to organise in their workplaces. We need to give them the tools to take offensive action and help them decide on the best strategies to win, which is often militant action, walkouts, boycotts and other creative actions. Often the biggest threat, and why we want Invasion, why it's not so public, is because we hang their reputations over their head. They knew they would have been destroyed if they didn't give in to the workers. No doubt the struggle today will inspire thousands more to come out in action. I'm just finishing up now, and I'll throw open the doors to provide a more organised vehicle for struggle. Union leaders need to be prepared to do that. The trade union movement could be transformed by this generation precarious coming in, beating down the door, being radicalised, wanting to enter it. Unite's hospitality campaign, just by existing, just by being there and getting young workers around, has inspired branches of Unite up and down the country to pay more attention, to become more active. Imagine the impact of a bigger struggle of precarious workers in the trade union movement. A re-energised trade union movement, an example again we've seen off today, that was just fantastic, could strengthen all of our struggles for pay, for recognition, against the housing crisis and against all of the crises that we face and the very worst excesses of this rotten system. So thanks very much.